The envelope arrived at 0300 hours on a Tuesday with no postmark, no return address, and no classification stamp. It was hand-delivered by a courier nobody recognized, wearing civilian clothes, driving an unmarked vehicle with plates that later came back registered to a car dealership in Phoenix that had been closed for 11 years. By the time the base security team ran the footage back through 3 cameras, the courier's face had been obscured in every single frame, as if something had glitched in each camera at the precise moment he passed beneath it. Sergeant First Class Darius Cole held the envelope for a long moment before opening it. In 12 years of special operations, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 classified rotation through Syria, and a mission in Eastern Europe that technically never happened, he had developed a particular instinct for danger. Not the loud, obvious kind that came with gunfire and explosions. The quiet kind. The kind that arrived in unmarked envelopes before the sun came up. He opened it anyway. Inside were 6 names. His own was at the top. Below his were 5 soldiers he knew better than he knew himself, men he had bled beside, men whose breathing patterns he could identify in total darkness, men whose silence he understood better than most people's words. Below the names was a single set of coordinates and a sentence that Cole read 3 times before the meaning fully settled into his chest like a stone dropping into still water. The sentence read, "Trust no one above your rank. The target is not what you think. When you find it, you will understand everything. Destroy it. Then decide what to do with the evidence." There was nothing else. No mission parameters. No rules of engagement. No extraction coordinates. No timeline. No commanding officer's signature. Nothing. Cole burned the envelope and the paper in the metal waste bin beside his desk at 0317 hours. He watched the edges curl and blacken until there was nothing left but ash. Then he made 6 phone calls, each less than 40 seconds long, each consisting of nothing more than a time, a location, and the word, "full kit." He hung up after each one without waiting for a response, because he didn't need one. These were men who didn't ask questions when the voice on the other end belonged to Darius Cole. They simply moved. By 0430, all 6 of them were standing in the motor pool behind Building 7, a place the base cameras conveniently didn't reach due to a maintenance issue that had been logged 6 months ago and never repaired. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb arrived first, as he always did, his jaw set like concrete, eyes scanning the perimeter with the automatic precision of a man who had spent so many years in dangerous places that his threat assessment never fully switched off, not even in sleep. Corporal James "Jimmy" Reyes came second, youngest of the group at 26, carrying more natural talent in his trigger finger than most men twice his age, but with a softness behind his eyes that the others quietly protected without ever discussing it. Warrant Officer Priya Nair, the only woman on the team, arrived without making a sound, appearing beside Cole as if she had materialized from the shadows themselves, which was essentially her professional specialty. She was the team's intelligence analyst, linguist, and the person most likely to notice the detail everyone else had walked past 3 times. Technical Sergeant Owen Park came rolling in on a borrowed bicycle with a rucksack that clinked faintly with equipment Cole recognized as off-book gear that Park maintained at his own expense because he trusted his own modifications more than anything issued through standard channels. Last came Master Sergeant Roland Raleigh Briggs, the oldest member at 41, moving with the unhurried confidence of a man who had made peace with every possible outcome a long time ago. Cole looked at each of them in the gray pre-dawn darkness. No one spoke. No briefing was given yet because there was nothing to brief. He simply distributed copies of the coordinates, watched each of them study the numbers, watched their faces for the reaction he expected. Webb's eyebrow moved a fraction. Reyes blinked twice. Nair tilted her head slightly to the left, which meant she was already calculating something. Park pulled out a small device from his vest pocket and cross-referenced the coordinates with topographical data he apparently kept stored offline. Briggs just exhaled slowly through his nose and nodded, as if a long-held suspicion had just been confirmed about something he hadn't known he suspected. The coordinates placed them in the Hindu Kush mountain range in northeastern Afghanistan, in a region that hadn't seen official coalition presence in 4 years, in an elevation band that was genuinely hostile to human survival for roughly 9 months of the year, in a specific valley that didn't appear by name on any map currently in circulation through any intelligence database any of them could legitimately access. Park confirmed all of this within 90 seconds on his device. He also confirmed something else, which he shared by simply turning the screen toward Cole without a word. The coordinates had a faint digital signature embedded in their transmission metadata, a signature that matched an encryption protocol last used by a unit that had been officially disbanded and classified in 2019. A unit that 2 members of their current team had previously served in. A unit whose final mission had resulted in 6 casualties listed as training accidents. They departed before sunrise in 2 civilian vehicles, drove to a secondary airfield 80 miles from the base that Cole had coordinated access to through a contact so far removed from the chain of command that the arrangement existed entirely in a space that had no official name. The aircraft waiting for them was a modified civilian turboprop with range modifications and no identifying markings, flown by a pilot who introduced himself only as Cypress and asked no questions beyond fuel weight and intended drop zone. The flight lasted 4 hours and 20 minutes. Most of them slept, because sleep before a mission is not a luxury but a discipline, and these were people who had mastered the discipline completely. They hit the drop zone at 1840 local time, with the last of the daylight bleeding out of the sky behind the western peaks in shades of amber and deep violet. The cold at altitude was not merely cold but a physical presence, something that pushed against exposed skin with the focused intention of a living thing. The wind moved down from the peaks in long rolling waves that made communication with anything louder than a whisper both unnecessary and unwise. Cole landed, checked his team visually, counted 6, and moved them into the tree line with hand signals before the sound of the aircraft had fully faded from the air above them. They established a temporary observation post in a rocky outcropping and Webb conducted a 360-degree sweep while Nair pulled out a notebook and began writing in a small, precise hand, cross-referencing something from memory that she had clearly been working through since the motor pool. Cole watched her for a moment. He knew better than to interrupt. When Nair wrote in the notebook it meant she was close to something and the best thing anyone could do was give her silence and let her arrive at it on her own terms. Reyes sat with his back against a boulder, rifle across his knees, watching the valley below them with the patient stillness of someone who genuinely did not feel the cold. Briggs ate a protein bar methodically, chewing without urgency, his eyes doing what they always did in the field, which was move slowly and miss nothing. They moved at midnight. The route Cole had memorized took them along a ridgeline that provided concealment from 2 directions while exposing them to a third, a calculated trade-off based on the topographical analysis Park had completed during the flight. Their pace was careful and deliberate, the kind of movement that covers ground without announcing itself, each footfall placed with attention, weight distributed gradually, nothing rushed, nothing careless. The moonlight that night was enough to navigate by but not enough to silhouette them against the snow at any meaningful distance, and Cole had timed the insertion specifically around the lunar cycle, a detail that Briggs noticed and acknowledged with a single approving look during their pre-movement check. 2 hours into the movement, Nair touched Cole's shoulder and held up a fist. The team stopped instantly, each member finding cover within 3 seconds by instinct and muscle memory alone. Nair moved close to Cole's ear and said 2 words in a breath barely above silence, "Signal here." Cole looked at the device she held, a passive intercept unit of Park's design that scanned for transmission signatures across multiple spectrum ranges. It was showing a faint but unmistakable broadcast signal originating from approximately 400 meters ahead and 200 meters below their current elevation. Broadcasting in a frequency range that was, according to everything Park had just confirmed with his eyes wide and his jaw tight, exclusively used by classified American military communication infrastructure. Someone or something was transmitting American military signals from a location that did not officially exist, in a region where no American military presence was documented, on a mission that no commanding officer above the 6 of them currently had any knowledge of. Cole processed this for exactly 4 seconds. Then he signaled the team to move toward the source. They found it 40 minutes later, buried beneath 3 feet of hard-packed snow at the base of a natural rock formation that had been deliberately chosen for concealment. Park identified the disturbed snow pattern first, a subtle irregularity in the surface density that most trained eyes would have dismissed as natural settling. He marked the perimeter with infrared markers visible only through their night vision, and they excavated carefully, working in silence with the focused efficiency of people who understood that what they were uncovering might be fragile, might be dangerous, or might be something that changed everything they thought they understood about why they were standing on this mountain at 2 in the morning with no orders. It was a server. Military grade, ruggedized for extreme environments, powered by a compact thermoelectric generator drawing heat differential from the ground itself, a sophisticated and expensive solution that had been designed to keep it running indefinitely without external power or maintenance. The casing carried manufacturing markings that Park photographed immediately and ran through his identification database while Cole and Webb stood security and Reyes crouched close to the device with his head tilted, listening to the faint electronic hum it produced as if it were telling him something in a language just below the threshold of understanding. Park looked up from his device. In the green-tinged light of the night vision, his expression was not alarm exactly, but something more controlled and more frightening than alarm. He was a man who had spent his entire career maintaining emotional neutrality in the presence of dangerous information, and what his face showed now was the cost of that discipline, the strain of holding composure against the weight of something that wanted very badly to break it. He turned his device so Cole could read the screen. The manufacturing serial number traced back to a procurement order from 2018. The procurement order was signed by a logistics chain that ran through 3 shell vendors before arriving at its true origin point. That origin point was the office of a deputy director within a classified division of American Defense Intelligence whose name Cole recognized immediately, not because they had ever met, but because that name appeared in the classified after-action report of the mission in 2019 that had killed 6 men and been logged as a training accident. Cole stood in the snow on that mountain for 7 seconds without moving, which was the longest he had stood still under any circumstances in 12 years of service. His mind moved through the implications with the systematic precision of someone who had been trained to assess complex situations rapidly, but the assessment this time kept arriving at the same conclusion from every direction, and the conclusion was monstrous in its clarity. The server was broadcasting. Actively. In real time. The content of the broadcast was something Nair had been working to decode since Park had first identified the transmission signature, and she had made enough progress to confirm the substance. It was coordinates. Hundreds of them. Updated continuously. Each one accompanied by an identifier code that Park confirmed matched the operational designation format used for active covert operatives currently deployed by American intelligence services. Someone had built a device and buried it on this mountain that was doing nothing except broadcasting the real-time locations of every active American covert operative currently deployed anywhere in the world to anyone with the correct frequency and decryption key to receive it. Not to an enemy command center. Not to a foreign intelligence service. Broadcasting to a private encrypted receiver whose registration, when Park traced the key architecture, circled back to the same name they had already encountered twice tonight. Reyes was the one who said what all of them were thinking, and he said it in a voice so quiet it was almost nothing, a voice that carried the particular quality of a young man making the transition between the person he had been and the person this moment was making him. He said, "They burned their own people. They're still burning them." Nobody corrected him, because there was nothing to correct. Briggs put a hand on the back of Reyes's neck for just a moment, the way a father might, and then withdrew it and went back to scanning the perimeter, because the mission was not over and grief and rage were things you carried with you but did not stop for. Cole gave Park 3 minutes to complete his documentation. Every angle of the device. Every visible marking. The transmission data Nair had captured. The serial number chain. The procurement trail. The frequency architecture. Park worked with the economical speed of someone who understood that 3 minutes was exactly what it sounded like and not a moment more. When the 3 minutes were done, Cole set the device's own thermoelectric power supply into a feedback loop that Park configured to produce a contained burnout, a process that would destroy the electronics completely without producing an explosion or significant thermal signature that could be detected from distance. They covered the site when it was done, restoring the snow's surface to something approaching its original appearance, and then they moved. The descent took longer than the ascent because Cole chose a different route, a longer one, adding 90 minutes to their movement time in exchange for avoiding two terrain features that he had mentally flagged on the way up as potential observation points. Nobody complained. Nobody questioned the choice. This was the language of their brotherhood, a complete and unspoken trust in each member's professional judgment that had been built through years of shared experience and tested repeatedly in circumstances that had no room for error. They were 2 kilometers from the extraction point when Webb, moving as rear security, clicked his radio twice. The prearranged signal for contact indication. The team melted into cover immediately. Cole counted heartbeats and watched Webb's hand signals in the moonlight from 40 meters ahead. 2 figures. Moving parallel to their route. Armed. Moving with the pattern of trained surveillance, not random movement. Someone knew they were here. The next 11 minutes were the kind of time that expands in memory to fill hours, each second containing more information and more decision-making than a normal minute of normal life. Cole and Webb managed the situation with the wordless coordination of 2 people who had rehearsed variations of this exact scenario enough times that their bodies carried the response without requiring conscious instruction from their minds. The 2 surveillance figures were neutralized without shots fired, using a sequence of movements that left both men alive, unconscious, and zip-tied in a position they would eventually free themselves from in approximately 4 hours. Cole checked their equipment. No unit identifiers. Civilian-grade weapons with professional modifications. Communications equipment running on a frequency that matched the encrypted receiver architecture from the server they had just destroyed. They extracted on schedule. Cyprus was where he was supposed to be, the aircraft idling at the far end of the dirt strip, navigation lights off, engine note reduced to the minimum sustainable level. Nobody spoke until they were airborne and the mountain range had shrunk to a dark jagged silhouette below them against the indigo pre-dawn sky. Then Briggs, who had said perhaps 30 words during the entire operation, turned to Cole and said, "What do we do with it?" And Cole understood that it did not mean the data Park had secured. It meant the knowledge. The decision that the data created. The thing that could not be unknowing once it had been known. Cole thought about the 6 men from the 2019 mission. He thought about their families, who had received folded flags and the words, "training accident," and had presumably spent every year since trying to build a version of grief that could accommodate an explanation that didn't fully fit the wound. He thought about the active operatives whose coordinates had been broadcast on that mountain, who were somewhere in the world right now believing their cover was intact, not knowing that a device buried in the Hindu Kush had been pointing at them for however long it had been running. He thought about the name on the procurement order, the name in the after-action report, the name connected to the private receiver. A man currently holding a position of significant authority within an apparatus that was trusted to protect the people it was instead apparently targeting. He thought about the chain of command and what happened when the chain of command was the problem. He thought about every oath he had taken and what those oaths actually meant at the point where their literal text and their underlying purpose diverged. He thought about Reyes's face in the green-tinged darkness when the young man had said what none of the others would say out loud. He thought about Briggs's hand on the back of that young man's neck, the quiet transmission of endurance from one generation to another, the unspoken promise that carrying this kind of knowledge was survivable. He opened his vest pocket and removed a small encrypted drive, the one Park had prepared during the descent, containing everything they had documented on the mountain. He held it for a moment. Then he put it back. "We don't go up the chain," he said. "We go around it." He didn't elaborate, because elaboration was not necessary. Nair was already thinking about who specifically and through what channel. Park was already thinking about how to ensure the data's integrity and authentication could withstand any attempt to discredit it. Webb was already thinking about operational security for whatever came next. Briggs was already thinking about the human beings who were going to be affected by what they chose to do and how to do it in a way that protected the ones who deserved protection and reached the ones who deserved something else entirely. Reyes was looking out the window at the darkness below, and Cole watched him for a moment with the particular attention of a leader who understood that the youngest member of the team had just completed a journey tonight that had changed the architecture of his understanding in ways that would take years to fully map. Cole didn't say anything to him. There was nothing to say that the silence between them wasn't already carrying more honestly. Sometimes the most important things that soldiers share are the things that don't require language, the heavy, real, permanent things that pass between people who have stood in the same darkness and seen the same truth and chosen, together and without discussion, to carry it forward instead of setting it down. They landed at 0612 hours. They dispersed in civilian vehicles before the sun had fully cleared the horizon. Within 48 hours, a package would arrive at the office of a federal prosecutor known for three things: an absolute record of independence from political pressure, a career-long specialty in classified misconduct cases, and the professional reputation of someone who had never, in 22 years of practice, lost a case they chose to take. The package would contain the drive and a single page of typed text with no signatures, explaining only where the drive had been found, what it contained, and how the evidence chain connected to the name at the center of it. The federal prosecutor would sit with the package for a long time before opening it. She would feel, as Cole had felt when he held that original envelope, the particular weight of something that changed the shape of the world you were living in. She would open it anyway, because that was what people who chose this kind of work did. They opened the difficult things. Cole arrived at his quarters at 0741, showered, and sat on the edge of his bed in the gray morning light for a while without moving. His phone held the only remaining copy of the photograph he had taken of the server screen, showing the transmission data and coordinates, encrypted behind a lock that would take considerable effort to crack. He looked at the phone for a moment. Then he set it face down on the nightstand and lay back and stared at the ceiling. His last thought before exhaustion finally pulled him under was not about what they had found or what they had done or what was going to happen next. It was about the 6 names on the original paper. His own at the top. The 5 men and women who had stood with him on a dark mountain and done something that had no name in any official manual, something that lived in the territory between duty and conscience where the most important decisions always lived. He thought about how they had received no orders for what they did, no authorization, no official sanction of any kind, and how in the complete absence of all of those things they had somehow managed to do exactly the right thing anyway. Somewhere across the base, in a building with better security than most people knew it had, a secondary server that nobody had found yet was still running. Still transmitting. Still waiting. The mission that Cole's team had just completed was not an ending. It was an introduction. And the next envelope was already in transit, moving through the dark in the hands of a courier nobody would recognize, toward a name that hadn't been told yet that their world was about to become considerably more complicated. If you made it to the end of this story, you already know why you need to share this with someone who loves a story that matters. Hit that subscribe button and never miss what comes next, because the next mission goes deeper, darker, and closer to the truth than anything you've heard before. Drop a comment right now and tell us where in the country you're watching from, because this story belongs to every corner of America, and we want to hear from all of you.